We always have a blast chatting with our guests about all sorts of different topics, but sometimes we go off the rails and dig deeper into their automotive and motorsports pasts. As a bonus, let's go behind the scenes with this pit stop mini-sode for some extra content that didn't quite fit in the main episode. Sit back, enjoy, and remember to like, subscribe, and support Break Fix on Patreon.
In this pit stop minisode, we return to Donald C. Davidson's storytelling with a nostalgic return to Watkins Glen, reminiscing about his first visit in 1972 and subsequent visits until 1977. Donald shares detailed stories about early experiences at the US Grand Prix, interactions with legendary drivers like Jackie Stewart and Niki Lauda, and the unique culture of the racing community at that time. His anecdotes highlight the camaraderie among drivers and fans, and Donald vividly recalls the vibrant atmosphere at events such as those held throughout the village and the track. He also reflects on the unchanged charm of the area despite the passage of time and shares humorous and poignant incidents from the heyday of Formula One at Watkins Glen.
It's really a kick to be here. It's kind of a pinch-me situation to actually be returning to Watkins Glen. I've never been to the research library before, because my years at the Glen far precede the research library. First time I came up here was in 1972, and the most recent time that I've been here prior to this weekend was 1977. And it came about because of the fact that one of my mentors, a gentleman who I had read, because he wrote some, a great historian by the name of Charles Lytle, and I know he's very, very important to the Arctic Singer family. And then I think probably the majority of you are either at least familiar with them, and maybe some of you had interaction with him. But he was an extraordinary gentleman from Sharon, Pennsylvania. With all due respect to everybody, of all the people that I have met, I felt that he was the best of the historians of the very early days. Although he was American, he was very English in his whole approach. The way that he spoke, and the fact that he had a great affection for Gilbert and Sullivan operas, and married a British lady, very, very British in his whole approach. It was just a delightful gentleman. And he was interested in Indianapolis and went back there for years, but his real interest was sort of like the road racing types of the very early days, and he made a number of trips to Europe. I don't know when the first one would be, but certainly late 40s and early to mid 50s. He went to Europe several times, and he would go and visit drivers who had participated. You know, I'm not talking just before World War I, I'm talking the city races, because he was an expert on Paris to Madrid and Paris to Amsterdam and all these. And he would show these photographs, and you know, it would be Vivier or whoever. He had all the pronunciation on all these people that had participated in 1898 and then through the very early 1900s. So just an extraordinary man. But anyway, I had written to him prior to making my first trip to Indianapolis. I wrote to probably a half a dozen people. And one of the questions that I had of him, because I would read the Floyd Kleiner yearbook every year, would be sections in the back where there would be a little brief story by Charles Lytle, and then these photographs that typically would have 2, 3, 4, 5 people lined up. But to this day, I can spot a Lytle print across the room, because you know, they had their own particular stamp on them, and what he did was to take photographs of veterans. It was wonderful to be able to see what these people look like. Long before there was a 500 Old Timers Club at the track, because that wasn't formed until 1961, but the Speedway was always a gathering place for all of these people, and that they were welcomed with open arms. So if you drove 25 years ago once and finished last, you were welcomed with open arms. And so everybody would come back, and some of them just come for a few days, others would spend the entire month. They bring scrapbooks, photo albums. It was just a huge gathering, you know, camaraderie amongst people that had run 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years before. And Charles would record all of this on film. And so the fact that I knew of over, you know, reading the Kleiner yearbooks over a period of several years and coming to realize what a great historian he was, there were several questions that I had about the early days. Specifically, there's some of the early drivers I didn't know a first name. Maybe just an initial or nothing. So they're very, very European, and that for those of you, and here I am on one of probably a number of tangents that I will do. If after you read Auto Car or Motorsport or whatever it was, and you go back into the 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, the drivers went by initials. Very rarely does a first name appear. So anyway, I was curious as to if you might know who some of these World War I era people were and what the first names were. So this typewritten note came back from the FE Car 159th Street here in Pennsylvania. He answered the questions on a number of them. So I can't say exactly what year that was, but probably 1962. I was sort of, on my way to eventually making the trip. So I remember when I first arrived at the track, and it's a whole long story, that he was one of the first people that I encountered. And I remember that when I went up and gave my name, he turned around. And he was probably, 5'7", and as a friend of mine would describe, round. And he always had 3-4 cameras hung around his neck, and a little bit of a quick line on that I wasn't even going to tell when it just hit me. But anyway, he wore this white shirt, typically, open, never a tie, several cameras, and he turned around, and when I gave my name, he sort of turned around and almost stood at attention and said, "Sir, I am very pleased to meet you." And he apparently was taken because of the fact that I was asking about these fellows from the early days. Well, from that point on, he became very important in my life, if he wasn't already, because he immediately started introducing me to a lot of the old timers that were around, and I had been seeing them and coming to know who everybody, what they look like through black and white photographs, and now I was meeting real people in full color. Those of you that were familiar with Vital, he would take photographs of all these people and then send them. He'd either give the person a print when next they saw him, which was probably next May, or he would send them out as Christmas gifts, and it was just groups of Joe Blowers standing with 4 or 5 other old timers. So he had cameras, usually 3 or 4, one in front, one down the side. And somebody once asked him, "Why do you carry so many cameras?" And he said, "Well, this is 4 slides. This is 35 millimeter in black and white. And I can't remember what the third one was, but anyway, the fourth one says, now this camera here is for those infernal people that come up and say, would you take my photograph with so-and-so? That one has no film in it at all." That was just delightful. To move along a little bit, my first trip to the track was 1964, and it was a 3-week holiday, exploratory visit. Things worked out so well that I returned the next year, 1965, on a one-way ticket in Greenford and just flying blind and hoping to land, which I did with the United States Auto Club. A very dear man named Henry Banks hired me to work at USAC, so that's a whole other story. But Charles Leifel would come and spend the greater part of the month. So I would spend a lot of time with him, we'd go to dinner and so on and so forth, and he had all these wonderful, wonderful stories. He had the connection with Watkins Glen that goes back to the very, very beginning. And I'm not sure about this, but I think he might have been one of the original 8-10 members of Sports Car Club of America when it was first formed. I mean, he was right in on the ground level. And also involved with Watkins Glen from the very start. Over a period of years, of course, the Glen history, you don't go from the streets to the course up on top of the hill, and eventually the United States Grand Prix. And he was a part of all of that. And I think his title was part of the course. And he would say to me every year, because I had an interest in Grand Prix racing, that's basically what I was raised on, except that to me, Grand Prix racing was 250F Maseratis and Lancia Ferraris and Borghinis, and then, rear engine cars came in and screwed the whole thing up. And then right up to Indianapolis and Roadster. So anyway, Charles Leifer would say, come to Watkins Glen. And I thought, 1.5 liter rear engine, little tiny little cars, and they don't do dairy power slides like they used to. You know, Peter Collins and Mike Hawthorne aren't living anymore, and Castellotti and Musso, and before Argo and Mansfield, it's just all these bricks driving around in these little pedal car looking things. So I'm probably getting a little facetious here, but anyway, so he would say year after year, come to Watkins Glen. Do come, and so finally 1972 was the year that I went up. So I was up here in 72, 3, 4, and 5, and then not in 76. I had a major conflict where I thought I wasn't even in the country, and then 77 was the finale. But anyway, I came up the first year, and the Grand Prix racing had changed quite a bit from what I had fallen in love with. But my golly, to arrive here and get to be involved in really the end of yet another era, because although it had changed dramatically, there were still the privateers. And for those of you, and I know many, I normally wouldn't even get into this, except that I know that so many of you have lived through this yourself. So you come to Watkins Glen, the little village of Watkins Glen, for the Grand Prix, and so we went to where we were going to get the credentials, and I was thinking that it was a high school. Is it St. Mary's? St. Mary's. And so we drove by that, Michael took me by there the last couple of days, and the building looked familiar, but I was thinking that we had gone down another street a little bit further. The point is that we went into this like a gymnasium with a floor just like this, with card tables set around on synchronizing heads, and I think that there was the basketball nets were hanging, and this is where you went to get your credentials. Everybody. And here's Jackie Stewart, you know, James Hunt, because the 72 was a little early for Hunt, or now I'm getting myself in trouble, but remember that I had met Jackie Stewart at the Speedway several years before, so I talked to him a little bit. And then I remember that he was right in front of me, and then he turned around, and then Francois Severa came in, and then stuck a finger in the back of his ribs and just did one of these, and I thought, isn't this amazing? Here's this little gymnasium, and the Grand Prix drivers of the world, Ronnie Peterson and X and all these other people are coming here to get their credentials. Then, of course, the other thing that was just amazing was when you went out to the circuit. It's the Kendall Tech Center is up on top of the hill, and the general public are permitted to go down through the middle and out the other side, and all of the teams will wind up there. There's no motor coaches, there's no $500,000 haulers, there's no sequestered away from the general public. There were all these bays, and I don't want this to sound wrong, but it was almost like it was the state fair, and that all of the places where the people would show their livestock. Each one of these bays had a Formula One car. And it was everybody. That was just astonishing to me, and I thought, I hope you people that are doing this really appreciate it, because I don't know that it's always going to be like this. I mean, even at the time, I was astounded that it was still like that. You know, sure enough, they had the line of people, and that they would go through the tech center, and there's Ferrari, and there's, you know, the Stewarts, and Laudas, there's Fittipaldi, and everybody, you know, because they were all there, and sometimes you see the drivers changing both. And they're doing the debriefing, and there's guys sitting there in jockey shorts, or with the engineers. And I don't know that if anybody had a computer there, but I mean, there would be, you know, the engineers had the clipboards, and there'd be all these discussions going on, and you could watch all of this. And then the other thing, too, that we've been talking about a lot the last few days, was that how did the cars get from the tech center down to the pits, and from the pits back up to the tech center? The mechanics drove them. And then you would hear this engine would fire up, and then here would be the car, either going up the hill at speed, or down the hill, and more often than not, there would be one or two other people riding on the car. On the side pod would be the fellow with the tool chips, hanging onto the roll bar. I have no idea what speeds they were doing, but I mean, they had to be 70, 80 miles an hour. And I was very surprised there, because already I was thinking about liability and so on and so forth, and that people could just sort of stand back at the side of the road, and then 3 or 4 Grand Prix cars would come up with the mechanic, no helmet, massive hair flying around all over the place, and so just so much color. I stayed at the Jefferson, which was this place with all kinds of character. I know I'm supposed to be talking about the Indianapolis Motor, we'll get there. But when I stayed in the motel unit that was out in the back, Charles Michael, made all the arrangements. And I think that I stayed in room number 1. I know it was on the lower level, and I drove by there this morning actually to have a look at the place, because the motel unit was still there. Then the Jefferson was this wonderful old place, and I don't know when that was open, but I mean, it was pre-1900, I think. Was it like maybe 1880s or something? 1840s. 1840s, okay. Well, so when we were in there were no carpets on the floors, and I think that they served food in I think there were 2 or 3 different rooms, if I recall, and a hard floor, no carpets, and they had these French windows. And it really looked like, you expected the ghost from Blythe Spirit to come in through the window, or Noel Howard to come in. You had those people. You had Rob Walker, and everybody, the acoustics were such that every clink of a plate, when anybody would get up and they would scrape their chair, and everybody was on top of each other, if you just look around and see all these people. I don't think any drivers stayed there, except I know one year, right above me was Tom Price. Not much is known about Tom Price, except that because he was very, very quiet. Well, not when he was walking around, he wasn't. I never, ever in my life stayed in a room or was ever in any situation with the floor above there was somebody that would literally stamp around. And I mean, this was, over about 3-4 day period or whatever. Every time he went from A to B, stamp, and all of the fittings would shake and everything. But I went to a friend of mine. I don't remember the first time I went to the Glen Motor Court. I notice it's not that anymore, and that's carpet men learned that. It's the Glen Motor Court, at least for some of us. So I don't remember the first time that I was in there for sure, but I know that in 1975, there was a fellow that I knew at a radio station in Indianapolis. He was originally from Cape Cod, that doesn't matter. He's in several different radio stations. A young guy, probably mid-20s, I suppose. His radio life brought him to Indianapolis, so he's at 1070 WIBC. I don't think he knew anything about racing, and somebody took him out to the track one day, and there was tire testing going on, and he met Johnny Weatherford, and then the next thing, he became a huge racing enthusiast, and he became a Formula One buff. It all happened in a hurry. For some reason, he hooked on to Niki Lauda, and Niki Lauda then was just his god. And so he and his lady friend, who was Kenner's wife, they came up here in 75, and I had come with Charles Lightly because, I guess this is getting into a little more personal than I planned, but Charles Lightly, the final year that he came up here was 1975, and he was not able to drive anymore, and it ended up that I was able to repay years and years of favors by driving from Indianapolis to Sharon, Pennsylvania. I picked him up and then drove him up to Watkins Glen and stayed in the same room with him and, basically was his chauffeur. It was equally great because we were allowed to park the car down at the south end of the pits, and Sterling Marsh would come by and Chris Amon would come by and all these people looking in the window, and all I had to do was just sit there with Charles. But we were invited to dinner, and so this friend of mine, Andy Humphreys, and he said, we're going to have dinner at the Glen Motor Court. And I said, good luck getting in there. He said, no, I've checked. If we get there early enough, we can get a good seat. So I don't remember what time we got there, but it was probably like 5 o'clock or 5:30 or something. The place was, I don't know, maybe half full, but it was beginning to pick up. I'm sure that probably many of you, if not all, have done the Glen Motor Court experience. And back then it was amazing because a number of the drivers stayed there. I remember over in the corner, Carlos Weideman and Carlos Pache were right over in the corner, just the two of them, in very deep conversation. Different people would come in and out. I remember Jody Schechter came in a tennis outfit with a rack. And he came in evidently looking for somebody that wasn't in there, and then he left. And then Regazzoni comes in with a black leather jacket with the collar turned up, which reminds me of another thing I was going to go back and tell you from 1972. It was almost a very, very nice guy, but he had a little bit of a menacing look about him. And the black jacket, the collar turned up, hands in his pockets, and he looked like he was looking for a fight. Well, I mean, he was a really nice guy, but I remember that. So there was a table vacant next to us. And here's my friend Nat, and we're looking at all these people coming in and out, and then all of a sudden he says, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the world champion just came in. And we looked up, and here's Niki Lauda, who just arrived, with another guy with him. That was Heinz Kula, who was an author. I don't know if anybody knows that name. He wrote the Ring book, and I think he did maybe a couple books with Lauda. Nat is just completely goes to pieces. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. He's in here. He's in the same, I'm in the same room with Lauda. Well, it got better because this vacant table, Lauda and Heinz Kohler sat right next to us. And Charles was so amused because to him, the great drivers were, Georges Boileau and Christian Lautenschlager. Anybody that's sort of come along in the 40s and 50s and 60s, he didn't take us seriously. Niki Lauda was sort of just like the latest flavor of the month. It was going to be gone in no time. And then, anyway, so he was needling that. And I bring this up because for any of you who may have gone in, are there people, in fact, that went into the Glen Motor Court in the 70s? I don't know if this is still there or not, but right under where he was sitting, there was a painting. If anybody remember this, it's Niki Lauda in a Ferrari, and I think there might have been one other car. Instead of a racetrack, it was sort of like on the beach in faded light. The time coming in. Does anybody remember that? It was the Ferrari with I don't know what this guy was thinking of, but it was actually it was an action shot, so it looked like a Michael Turner, but it wasn't a Michael Turner. And he's splashing through this water. So Lauda was talking to Heinz Kohler, and at one point he sort of looks up at this thing and goes, and then I was able to say, why are you driving in the sea? And so I don't remember what the response was, but anyway, it just made Nat stay, and I don't know why I brought this up other than that I'm just a horrendous name dropper. And talking about Regazzoni, the first year that I came out here, and it was great because Charles took me to all these places. I mean, I had access to everything. It was the Onyx Club at the time. They had a champagne party there. It was the last year. They had done this for 7 years, but because of financial considerations, it ended up that I made it to the last one that they had. They would invite a lot of participants to go to this thing. I mean, it was very, very in. And the Onyx Club, to me, it was like going to a ski lodge. It was the first week in October, so it would get dark at like 5:30, and it would be pitch black by 7. And so here's everybody going to this party. And I remember Ron Taranak was there, and Sam Posey, and on and on and on. Anyway, the Ferrari team were detained because they were having a debriefing. And I'll never forget this. I just happened to be standing by the door. The door was open, and it was a little bit nippy. It would get frosty up here. And so party is now in full swing, and here came the 3 Ferrari drivers, and I'll never forget this. It was Jackie Ickx, Regazzoni, and Mario with the Ferrari team. And they arrived from their debriefing. They still had the uniform on. and then the red Ferrari Firestone jackets with the collars turned up. And they stood there, and you know, when Mario entered the room, not the tallest guy that there's ever been, but he had a presence about him. I've been in several situations where Mario comes in and everything stops. And there's no punchline to this, except that he would come into a room, as he did that night, and he would stand there, and it reminded me of Jack Palance in Sheen. Although Mario didn't pack pistols, he would stand there and just kind of go, handbrake was on it. They would just come into the room and kind of stand like this. With the collars turned up. Anyway, I'll never forget that. So, just these little images. I am going to move on, but I'll give you a couple more images. One that was just given to me by the son of a famous name. Wilbur Shaw had a son, Bill Shaw, and I don't know if any of you may have ever had a connection with him. He's actually Warren Wilbur Shaw Jr. He's just a delightful person, and he did race for a while, awfully close to going to Le Mans in sometime in the early 70s. He was an instructor for Bob Bondurant for several years, so some of you may have run into him there. But anyway, he's lived in the Indianapolis area for quite a number of years now. So I told him, or he needed me when I was coming up here, or I told him that I was coming up about a week ago. And he said, wow, the Glen. I said, did you ever run up there? And he said, no. But he said, I actually went there once. And he said, I went with a student of mine who was going to run in an SCCA regional. And he said, he was working in Washington at the time. He said, I went in there, and even though it was a regional meet, he said, I started getting images of what had gone before. And he said, I had these flashes of Brabham and Stewart and Clark. And he said, I'd never been there before, but he said, it was really kind of overwhelming. He said, I could hear the sounds, smell the smells, and he said, I got goosebumps thinking about it. He said, I got goosebumps then, and I got goosebumps now, just talking about it. This was just like a week ago. And I said, I think I know exactly what you mean. And he kept saying, wow. So, and when this was, I have no idea, but I mean, that might have been 30 years ago. So, you know, the place has this wonderful presence. I got a little Glen story to tell here. Some of the opinions expressed herein may not necessarily be those of the management. A Glen story, and I don't know if this is true or not, and I would do nothing to be a negative about the place, but I do remember the smoke in 1974 rising from an infamous area that probably the locals would rather not talk about. I get asked about the state here at the racetrack all the time, and I know that the locals up here would just as soon not acknowledge that there had ever been the bog. But anyway, the reason for bringing that up was that the first year that I was up here, it rained a lot. And I was impressed by how large the crowd was, but also the makeup. I mean, you would hear the foreign accents, so obviously there were people that had come from overseas, and then you had the people overseas that lived here, but then also there seemed to be a lot of college types. And I saw fatigue jackets, I saw long hair, and I saw a number of couples where the male and the female were joined by a piece of twine or rope. Does anybody remember that? I'm not making it up. And you'd see the guy would have a wine bottle, and there would be like a piece of twine around his wrist, and that the lady friend, who was also wearing denim and fatigues, would be, you know, a few feet further behind. Anybody? I mean, I'm not making that up. Anybody remember those days, or you just put it out of your mind? So there was this apparent story, which I think was probably 73, 74. I didn't read this on Wikipedia or get it on a blog years later. I remember at the time the story was that there was a well-to-do person involved with a team. They weren't a team member, but they were sort of like a gopher. They were a stooge and eager to do anything that needed to be done. So one of the teams needed something that the fellow said, I can get it, and he went down to the village, and it's at night. So he went down to the village in his very expensive automobile. When he comes back, he got lost. And he's at the circuit, but he couldn't find his way to the Camaraderie Center. And he's driving around, and he gets over into the dock area with all the thousands of pop cans and everything. And so he's going down this little road, and everybody's sort of kind of just freely walking back and forth. You know, the bonfires are going, and the parties are in full swing. His progress is being impeded with the rolling through. It finally gets to the point where he stops. And so they start making a big fuss of this car, and they're banging on the roof, and then they start rocking the car. The guy panics and thinks, I better get out of here. So he gets on the throttle, and as he takes off, he feels a bump, and he thinks, oh my God, I think I've run over one of them. So he keeps going, and he thought, well, I have to report this to the police. So he drove around to wherever the police were, and it seems to me that there was this little cinder block building with, a piece of wire with a, naked light bulb hanging there. So the guy comes back, sees this building, goes in there, and there's like 3 policemen sitting in there. So he said, I want to report something. He said, I think I ran over somebody. And so they don't move particularly, and they said, well, where was this, sir? Well, it was over in the back where all the pop cans are. And they said, well, did you get a look at the person? And he said, well, no, because everybody looked the same. They're all in denim and petite jackets, but I really think that I ran over one of them. And so they said, don't worry about it. We'll find it in the morning. I don't know if that's true or not, but I probably shouldn't have told that story. All right. We need to be talking about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We didn't get into that yet. So, to come to the Glen, have those experiences in 73, 73, 74, and then drive around today and then see how little has changed. But the Glen Motor Court, the name is subtle change, but it's still there. I actually pulled into the parking lot and just sat there and just reminisced a little bit. And I went by, the Jefferson is gone, but the motel units are out in the back still. And they were green doors, and now they're brown. But I actually sat there on both sides of the road and just nostalged, which is the name I made up.
This episode is brought to you in part by the International Motor Racing Research Center. Its charter is to collect, share, and preserve the history of motorsports, spanning continents, eras, and race series. The center's collection embodies the speed, drama, and camaraderie of amateur and professional motor racing throughout the world. The center welcomes serious researchers and casual fans alike to share stories of race drivers, race series, and race cars captured on their shelves and walls and brought to life through a regular calendar of public lectures and special events. To learn more about the center, visit www.racingarchives.org. This episode is also brought to you by the Society of Automotive Historians. They encourage research into any aspect of automotive history. The SAH actively supports the compilation and preservation of papers, organizational records, print ephemera, and images to safeguard, as well as to broaden and deepen the understanding of motorized wheeled land transportation through the modern age and into the future. For more information about the SAH, visit www.autohistory.org.
We hope you enjoyed another awesome episode of Break Fix Podcast, brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Grand Touring Motorsports. And if you'd like to learn more about the content of this episode, be sure to check out the follow-on article at gtmotorsports.org. We remain a commercial-free and no annual fees organization through our sponsors, but also through the generous support of our fans, families, and friends through Patreon. For as little as $2.50 a month, you can get access to more behind-the-scenes action, additional Pit Stop minisodes, and other VIP goodies, as well as keeping our team of creators fed on their strict diet of Fig Newtons, gummy bears, and Monster. So consider signing up for Patreon today at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. And remember, without you, none of this would be possible.